for mapping the journey, let me map the remainder of the afternoon. There are some that are no longer with us in the room. If I'm just looking around the room, so you can text your friend that's already left and say he noticed. He noticed you're gone. He's crying publicly, and he said that he's going to track you down later. So that'll be fun. I know. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap up this part of mapping the journey. We're going to take the next 5 boxes, fill those in. Then we've got a little bit of a project that I want you to work together on as a group from your church. I know most of you in the room, there's at least 2 or 3 people from your church. So we're going to do that together. Take a few minutes to do that, and then we're going to end the day with another just kind of Q&A session. If you've got some questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you want to just make a group pact that nobody is going to ask a question and you'll get out of here earlier, that's okay too. Like whatever you want to do. So y'all should work out a signal right now and start letting each other go, don't anybody ask this guy any questions. But one way or another, hard stop at 2 p.m. We won't be here past that. Is that good? You don't be that kid that's like, teacher, you forgot to assign homework, and then, off to the races. You go get beat up after class. So let's finish out mapping the journey. We talked about website and social media. We talked about the physical approach to the building. Talked about parking. Talked about outer entry. Talked about a first-time guest kiosk. Let's move to family ministry. So there is a sense in which that regardless of whether we have children or students in our congregations, we've always got to be ready for children and students in our congregation, right? My home church in Middle Tennessee, they went through a season of several years where the average age of the congregation was such that there were no babies. But anytime a baby showed up, they had 2 or 3 volunteers that were always ready and always on call. They would run to the nursery and flip on the lights and turn on the bottle warmers or whatever it is that you do. They were ready to go for that. But we've got to think about family ministry. Don and I were just talking out in the lobby of how important it is when a teenager, a child, whoever shows up, that they feel like they are just as much a part of what's going on here as my parents feel. Now, I will tell you, I love. I've got 3 adult kids, one 15-year-old who thinks she's an adult, smarter than I am, according to her, whatever. And I love my 4 kids most of the time. I love my grandkids all the time, right? Whenever our first was born, I was sitting there, and my son said, "Dad, I get the feeling that you love her more than you ever loved any of us." And I just sat there and I said, "What is the question? I'm sorry. What are you asking me? She's way better than you ever thought about being, right?" I love my kids. I love my grandkids. I don't necessarily love your kids and grandkids, right? And sometimes what I'm bad about is standing there and I'll talk to adults and there's kids standing there and I'll never acknowledge them. Listen, I've got to get past that. You've got to get past that. My wife, who is wonderful with children, she was a preschool teacher for years. She led preschool ministry in our church for a few years. She has always taught me that if you are greeting children, like if you're in a position where you're talking to adults, there's kids there, that you always take a knee. You get eyeball to eyeball. Now, the older I get, the harder it is to get back up after that's all over with. But you want to be able to look at the kid, compliment them on their light-up shoes or their Dora the Explorer backpack or whatever it is, and have a conversation with them, not just with parents. Same thing with teenagers. Sometimes it's going to be really hard. You're going to get some grunts back. You're not going to get eye contact or a lot of them talking to you, but we should try to do that. We want to be able to help parents feel like, especially in our day and age, that when you hand your most precious asset over to us, we are going to take care of them. We are going to watch over them. They're going to be fine. I can remember early on, we were talking earlier about our days in student ministry. I was a student pastor for 10 years before going into the role that I'm in now. And I think of the number of parents who handed their kids off to this know-nothing early 20s-year-old, and I'm thinking, what were they thinking? You know, and I have a vivid memory of one time a parent being kind of nervous as she was dropping her kid off for an event, and I said, hey, don't worry, we got this. And I'm like, boy, you didn't have that. You didn't have nothing. You didn't know anything that you were doing. But I was at least trying to convey some confidence that we had that. So we've got to do that with the families that are showing up to our churches. How do we do that? I think, a lot of things. We talked earlier about emergency contact numbers, allergy information, how to get in touch with the family if they need to, being there to help, walk a family through. One of the things that we do at that first-time guest tent is we intentionally overstaff that tent to make sure that we've got more volunteers there that we think we're going to need, so that when a family walks up, or a couple walks up, or an individual walks up, or whatever, you can walk away from that tent. Somebody else is going to be there to take your place. You can stay gone as long as you need to, walking the family where they need to go, and know that the tent is covered, and you don't have to worry about nobody being there. And so we try to make sure that our first-time guest volunteers are walking those kids through. They know where the classrooms are. They know who the teachers are, so that they can introduce the family by name. So the family is not having to go through introducing themselves again and again and again. Next is going to be auditorium entry. We talked about outer entry. That's the doors outside. That's the sidewalk. Auditorium entry is obviously going into the auditorium. Listen, this is one of the teams that will be very, very helpful in maintaining let's say the dignity of your service, right? There are a lot of our services, we'll have times of a little bit more robust worship, and then times of a little quieter reflection. You might have in your services from time to time where there might be something on the screen where the lights in the room go down a little bit, or you're doing baptism, or you're doing communion, and you don't want it to be a parade in and out of the doors. Helping your auditorium team know what's happening, what's going on, and helping them to kind of know the schedule so that they can keep the doors closed when they need to, open doors when they need to, know where the open seats are inside. That's going to be very important as you're going. Auditorium seating. This is one of the Baptist favorite topics. Because Baptists love to be told where to sit, don't we? We just love that. That never goes wrong for anybody. But again, auditorium seating is a little bit like having a parking team. Some of you don't need that. You got an auditorium that'll seat 200 people, and you average 75 people. I have been sitting there beside a volunteer before where we've got a 500-seat auditorium. We just opened the doors, and they're stopping people as they come in and going, how many in your party? Two? Okay, hang on just a second. And they'll look around. Like, dude, it's wide open seating. I mean, don't be like Pharaoh. Let those people go. Like, just make it happen, right? And so we don't necessarily, in all situations, we don't necessarily need to worry about seating. But if you do, or let's say that there is a certain Sunday that you know you're going to need to, like an Easter Sunday or a Christmas Eve service or whatever, where if there's an open seat on the inside, that might mean that somebody is standing outside, waiting to get in. Let me give you some things just to think about. You can jot some notes down on page 23 if you want to do that. An auditorium sitting team is not just ushers, okay? Could be ushers, but that's not the only thing that they are responsible for. They kind of have the lay of the land, what's happening in the service, what's going on the stage, where the open seats are. They're trying to get people in. If it's a Sunday where you're expecting higher levels of attendance and every seat matters, then I'm going to recommend that you're going to try to seat people from the front to the back and from the center to the sides. You're going to want to leave plenty of room on the aisle so that you can seat people in. If it's a day where you're going to be at max capacity, maybe have a couple of built-in times where you're encouraging people to scoot in or whatever. Those are important things for our guests, because here's the thing. We recognize that at some point somebody's going to have to sit where they don't want to sit, right? At our church, we have those stanchions, the little metal bars that we'll put up that'll kind of force people down towards the front, and then we open those up as more people arrive. And one Sunday, it's been a couple of years ago, one of our volunteers who I've known for a long time, love her and her family to death. Her name is Susie. That's not a made-up name. That's actually her name. But Susie comes to me and she says, "Hey, I'd like to have a conversation about those poll things." And I said, great. So service got underway. I said, let's step over to the side or whatever. So we sit down and talk. I said, all right, what's going on with the poll thing? She says, I don't like them. And I said, that's thank you for making that very clear. There's no room for error in this conversation. And I said, Susie, I do not like them either. And I am the one who orders them, plans for them, installs them, and enforces them. And she said, great. Why do we have them? I said, that's a very fair question. I said, we know that we need to push people, front and center, because we're usually going to be full. And she's like, okay, fine. She said, but what about people who get here on time and they want to sit where they want to sit? And I was like, I'm not really worried about the people who get here on time. Because if they're getting here on time, they probably are invested enough. They've been around, whatever. So then I did this. Listen, I'm either very, very proud of this or I'm ashamed of this. I can't figure out which one it is. I'll tell you the story. You tell me which one it ought to be, right? So Susie has an adult son. His name is Scott. He has a wife named Jay. Scott and Jay have two now teenage kids. And Scott and Jay have not been in church in years and years, and Susie has prayed for them for years and years to get back in church. I know Scott, we're friends, and so I said, Susie, let's not think about this according to what makes us comfortable. I said, let's think about Scott and Jay. She said, okay. I said, what happens if they show up at church this Sunday and they're 10 minutes late? Where are the open seats? If we don't have those barricades to push people up front, where are the open seats if people just get to sit wherever they want to? She said, I mean, first three rows are always going to be open because nobody sits on the first three rows. Again, I don't know what's going on with y'all, but nobody sits on the first three rows. And she said, and I said, where are they going to sit? She said, if they're 10 minutes late, she said, well, they got to go down front. And I said, and for Scott and Jay who don't want to be here anyway, what does that do for them? And she looked down, and she looked up, and she said, okay, we'll do the barricades, right? Now, again, either I should be ashamed of myself or I should be incredibly proud because that was a sneaky move, but it worked. Here's the point. We talk about the gospel being offensive, nothing else should be, but in a sense, we're always choosing whom we are going to offend, right? If you're making people scoot front and center on a high-attendance Sunday so that there's always room in the back for people who are coming in late, you're either offending the people who got here early on time and want to sit where they want to sit, or you're offending the people who got here late. But the people who got here late are probably looking for any excuse not to walk in the door, and if they've got to walk in front of 200 people to sit down, that's probably a good enough excuse for them to turn around and go home. So I'm not saying you got to have barricades. I'm not saying you got to push people front and center. I'm just saying we've got to count the cost if we don't do those sorts of things. So we've got a plan for people. We've got to be able to assist them during the service. We've got to be able to help them, take their, take literal steps into the auditorium to figure out where they're supposed to sit. All right, next thing. Two more, and we're done with this section. Let's talk about the stage and the sermon. Those of you pastors in the room, buckle up. We're about to talk about you for a few minutes. Just plug your ears and pretend we're not here, all right? I think that this is where sometimes we can go pretty badly wrong. Because what excites pastors when they look out at a congregation? They love to see new people, right? They know the old people. They're used to you. They're used to me. We don't impress them anymore. They're excited to see new people, right? But sometimes, and I've been in church long enough, and I've been a pastor long enough that I can say both of these things and know both of them to be true. Sometimes pastors, we don't do a really good job. We don't steward well the responsibility that we've been given, right? What's that famous line from Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility. We don't always do it that well. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Growing up, in my church in Southern Middle Tennessee, we always had time in the service, every single service, where my pastor, Brother James or Brother Dwight, depending on what era of my childhood we're talking about, would stand up, they get behind the pulpit, and they'd say, "Well, we got a lot of visitors in here this morning," because they didn't know it was a four-letter word and we shouldn't say it. So if you're a visitor, would you raise your hand up real high? And so people would, very cautiously raise their hand up. And then there'd be four ushers in the back in matching suits that would come forward like they were storming the beachheads of, some foreign country. I don't know. And they'd come down and the floorboards would shake in, our little country church. And they'd come down and they'd start passing out cards down the row with the ink pen clipped to it that didn't actually write. And then they'd have the little peel-off fabric rose, the peel-off fabric rose that you'd pop on your lapel to let everybody know that you were new. And our pastor sometimes, if the Spirit moves just right, would ask you to stand and introduce yourself, which is a great idea. He stopped just short of asking for the sin that you're currently struggling with. Like that was, great. Now, did my pastor have any ill will? No. Did he love every single person who showed up? Absolutely he did. But did that make them want to come back? Probably not. Let me tell you something we also do still today in a lot of our churches. I do not know your churches. I have never been to one of your services. So if I am saying this and it is hurting your feelings, it is not directly targeted. But I'm just going to say it out loud. If you do the turn and greet your neighbor time, you need to kill it. You need to kill it with fire. You need to bury it. You need to dig it back up, shoot it, and bury it again. Right? Let me tell you why. Okay. Let's just do this. That's a challenge. I'm gonna get myself in so much trouble. How many of you actually do the turn and greet your neighbor time in your churches? You just take time. All right. Keep your hands up. If you do the turn and greet your neighbor time, be honest, raise your hand. Leave them up. How many of you actually like it? Okay, this is very unusual. All right, well, I am in the minority, and I will own that. But let me tell you what normally happens. Normally what happens is, again, we're friendly, but we're friendly to each other. We walk around and we talk to people that we already know. We don't look for people that we don't know. Introverts really hate it. Germaphobes really hate it. Sometimes it's covering up for an awkward transition on the stage, and the turn and greet your neighbor moment turns into like 7 minutes of unparalleled chaos. A few years ago, one of my daughters-in-law was visiting her sister who attends a church in Charleston, and she texted me in the middle of the service, and she says, "Okay, my dear guest services father-in-law, you're not going to believe this. We just your neighbor time that lasted for 15 minutes. And she said, and all I wanted to do was just go out in the parking lot and wait on somebody to run me over. Like, that's all I wanted because it was so bad, right? Are you what you got? Yeah. 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 As they're coming down. Okay. All right. If I come to your church, I'm just going to go to the bathroom during that time. I'm going to head out. I'm going to do it. Listen, I recognize. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. I recognize in this room I might be in the minority. But if you poll most of the first-time guests at your church, they're going to be like, that was just weird, and I don't ever want to have to deal with it again because I just stood there. And I've gone to churches before, and I've actually just tried to be that guy, just to stand there and stare straight ahead and see who talks to me. And 8 times out of 10, nobody makes an effort because they're like, oh, well, he seems like a homicidal maniac. Like he's just staring, whatever. I don't know. Again, I've lost that argument. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes. Oh, boy. Ah. Yeah, it just makes my soul die a little bit on the inside. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. All right, last one. Last one. Next steps. So the question that there should always be in every service, in every sermon, there should be a couple of questions that are at least kind of rolling through our minds, even if we don't ask them out loud. One is, so what? If a first-time guest is coming to your church and you're presenting them with a worldview that they've never considered before, a scripture they've never read before, a Jesus they've never met before, there should be at some point where they're kind of, even if they don't articulate it that way, they're saying, okay, so what? Like, what does this actually mean for me? But then there should be a second question that they're asking is, okay, now what? Some of them are going to be intrigued enough to continue the conversation. Some are going to be intrigued enough to go to coffee with a pastor. Some are maybe want to come to a Sunday school class, or maybe somebody has just sort of been attending for a while and they want to start serving. Whatever it is, there needs to be a so what and a now what. And we've got to figure out, going back to what we said earlier before lunch, there is a menu that we can present of all 48 different ministry options that we have for you, or there is a specific map that we can help people by saying, this is where I feel like you are, and this is a point B that I feel like we want to get you to. How does that feel to you? And I think that we've got to be able to clearly articulate that on behalf of our guests before they have to think about it for themselves. Again, I know I used the restaurant illustration earlier, but it's kind of like when a waitress or a waiter or whoever is helping you through the process as you go. Hey, here's your check. There's no rush. When you get ready to pay, I'll take it here, or you go up front and do that. Like if you've never been somewhere before, we have this kind of curse of knowledge that we feel like, because I know this, everybody else should know this, but our guests don't necessarily know that. So those are what are those, 10 things that I would say you want to begin to think about what those things look like in your context. Now, I want to put this into practice for us as we go through the last few moments of our day. So I have got, if you don't mind, Pastor John, and you might, I think Don abandoned us, you might want to get a helper there. I have brought for each of you an aerial map. This one's laminated just so I don't bend it up. Yours is not laminated, but an aerial map of different churches that are represented in the room. So I should have one for all churches. This is Reedy Branch. If you recognize that, that's your church, aerial view of that. And Pastor John is going to pass those around. We've got enough for like every 2 or 3 people to have a group of those. Would it be helpful to call out names of churches and people raise their hand? Or you just know them by sight? And then we're also going to pass around some markers and highlighters and pens and all of those sort of things. So as those are coming around, I'll give you a chance to get those, and then we're gonna walk through an exercise together if we can do that. And if you want to get up and pair up with some other people from your church, that'd be fine. And I'm going to give you some further instructions as soon as we get all those in your hands. And if y'all want to take a few of those and just pass them all around, that'd be great. If y'all want to take a few of those and just pass them all around this area, I'll start these up front. If y'all want to take a few and pass those just back as you go. All right. Does anybody not yet have a map? Would you raise your hand? You might not have a map yet. All right. We're still... Pastor John, Open Arms needs some up here. We've got markers and all of those things coming around. You're reading my mind. You're doing good. All right. Here's what I want you to do. You should have in your hands a map of your facility coming around, or markers. If you don't get those, their baskets are floating around. If you want to think about sketching the inside of your building, because I didn't have, obviously, access to that, I've got graph paper up here on the front. You can come up and grab a few sheets of graph paper if you would like to do that. So those are right there. Here's what I want you to do. This is a choose your own adventure, okay? You get to decide what this project is going to look like. But I want you to think about what you're doing from the experience of one of your church's first-time guests, okay? So you've got to pretend you've never been to your church before. You've got to pretend you don't have the insider knowledge that you do. You've got to ignore the fact that that is the parking spot that you have parked in since 1984. You've got to not think about the door that you're walking in, what your signage is, all of that. You've got to think about all that from the perspective of a first-time guest. And by the way, if you want to do that on the graph paper, you can map out your lobby or your auditorium or whatever you want to do. You can pick as many or as few of these things as you want to pick. You need to decide as a group what you're going to do, and you're only going to have about 20 minutes to do this. And I'll be calling time as we go. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about, from the lens of a first-time guest, if we were to have, let's say, a parking team, where would we place people and where are the combustion points? If we were going to have the number of outer entry volunteers that we wanted, where would we place them? If we were going to do more signage, where would we put them? If you're sketching out your auditorium because seating is a problem, where would we put seating volunteers? In your lobby, where would you put people? Again, this is choose your own adventure. But here's the question that I would advise you to ask, okay? Let me give, somebody just got shushed. Here's the question that I would advise you to ask. If time and people and resources were not a factor, what would this plan look like? You say, well, time and people and resources are a factor. We don't have the budget. We don't have the volunteers. Forget all of that. Pretend blue sky thinking that you have no limits on anything. You got as many people as you want. You got as much money as you want. How would you scope this out? All right? So you have about 15 or 20 minutes. Again, choose your own adventure. I'll be walking around if you've got questions, and we'll work through this together. Oh, I just took away there it is. All right. Y'all try to do this by committee? Yeah. Money. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Did somebody have something that you just said, this has been staring me in the face all along, and I just now figured out this is our solution? What was it? Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. That's great. Somebody else, something that's been staring you in the face the entire time and you didn't know it. Or you just came up with something you're going to put into place. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's exactly right. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. That's good. That's really good. You were about to say? That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Maybe one more. One more insight that somebody pulled from that little exercise. You're going to do a tent. Good. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Very good. Pastor John just raised his hand, wants to know where that budget line comes from, but that's all right. You listen. Good news is it's in everybody's pockets already. The Lord's already given it to you. Melissa. Uh huh. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sure. That's really good. That's good. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that we always say with our volunteers is you never point, you always take. So you wear your running shoes on Sunday morning because you don't want to tell somebody, oh yeah, it's real easy, fine. You just go in those double doors, go down about 50 feet, past 7 doors, take the ninth door on your right, go down that hallway. You're going to come to a potted plant that's dead, then take a whatever. They've forgotten everything past the double doors. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And it gives you a great opportunity. And let me give you another little pro tip. If you want to change the culture of guest services pretty fast around here, get a bunch of umbrellas. Get them at Home Depot for $7. And the next time it rains, you just deploy people outside. I will tell you, I know of at least 2 stories in our church over the years of people who have come to faith. Their faith journey began with an umbrella being held over their head. That was not the gospel. They didn't come to faith under the umbrella, but that began it. One quick story. One of our pastors is one of the strongest personal evangelists that I know. He shares his faith all the time, just beautifully. And his wife's sister, non-believer, and she was his own personal project. And I use that term very specifically. She was a project. He would tell you she was his project. And he would share the gospel with her all the time, and she would shut him down. And he had all of these apologetics and all of these, here's why your worldview is wrong. And he would try to knock all the props out from underneath her and all that. And they were just, like banging heads. This was husband and his wife's sister. And well, that is true too. And so he's trying over the course of a couple years to share the gospel with her. So fast forward, this friend of mine, one of our pastors, his daughter is getting baptized. And so his sister-in-law, this little girl's aunt, is going to come and watch her get baptized. The day that she shows up, it is an absolute monsoon. I mean, just buckets pouring down out of the sky. And when she gets out of her car, there is a volunteer standing there, all smiles with a big old golf umbrella, and puts it over her head, says, hey, good morning, welcome to Summit. Let me walk you in. And so she walks her in. She watches her niece get baptized. At lunch afterwards, the only thing that she can talk about is, why did that person do that? And he was like, because that's what we do. We just hold the umbrella over people. And she's like, but I don't get it. They didn't know me. They don't know me anything. Like, why did they do that? That set off the beginning of a spiral with her, where she began to ask deeper questions about Christianity and why Christianity leads to behavior like that, more than his 2 years of apologetics bashing ever could. And he would tell you her journey to faith began not with him trying to passionately share the gospel. It began with somebody holding an umbrella over her head. And so that's the kind of environment that we get to build. That's exactly right. Here's what I hope that you got out of that. I did not expect that project to be the end-all, be-all, and now you've got your plan, and you're going to leave here and immediately go to your church and build out all of these systems by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's not the goal of that. The goal is that it began you having a conversation with one another where you begin to dream about and think about what could be and how you could do this. You're not going to get there overnight. A lot of the things that I've talked about that we've implemented, we did not get there overnight. I'm in my 22nd year of ministry at our church, and there are still plenty of days where I feel like I'm just getting started on figuring out how these things work. What I want for you is to begin the process where you know, okay, now that we have what we know, what do we do with what we know? What do we do with these things if we're going to create a guest-friendly culture? Okay. Let's do some Q&A if you've got it. I'm not going to needlessly belabor the room and make you stick around for 30 minutes. But if you've got a few questions, I'd love to answer a few questions. And I've got one final brief challenge I'd like to give you, a couple of closing thoughts, and we will be on with our Saturday afternoon. Does that sound fair? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When somebody does something kind for us, it causes us just to stop and be like, okay, why? What was that all about? Oh, well, that's even fancier. I like that. All right. Questions? Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Melissa. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good. There you go. There you go. Questions? That, or you're just like glazed over, and I can't take it anymore. If I ask this guy a question, he's going to keep talking, and I can't do it. I can't do it. Maybe so. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. She just said, in case you couldn't hear, there's probably one of these for the youth. I want to end with a story, and then I want to give you a challenge. I mentioned a few minutes ago that I spent the first decade of ministry as a student pastor. I am still going through therapy for the first decade I spent as a student pastor. There's a lot of us, Paul, that are wired to do it, and then there's some of us that know where our gifts are, right? And during that time that I was a student pastor, I heard the story of a guy. I never met him personally, but I had heard his story told. That he was a student pastor. He had the exact same problem that every single person that's ever worked with teenagers in the local church has, and that is that the kids who grew up in his church would never talk to the kids who were new to the church. You've seen this phenomenon? And so like on Wednesday nights when they'd have this big kind of open Bible study for the community to show up at, this guy said I'd have the 50 kids that were always there, that had grown up in the church, and he said then I'd have 3 or 4 kids from the community, and they'd walk in, and my 50 would never talk to the 3. It didn't matter that they had just spent all day in school together. It was just too weird. They were in a different environment. They couldn't walk over and talk. He said, so this guy said, I watched this happen Wednesday night after Wednesday night. He said, finally I got so frustrated with it. He said, I grabbed my leadership team together one Wednesday night. He said, my leadership team was like 6 kids that were from 7th through 12th grade. We'd meet together once a month. We'd plan events. We'd troubleshoot things in the group and all of this stuff. He said, but they were kids themselves. He said, so I grabbed them one Wednesday night after I watched this happen. He said, okay, this Sunday, this month, our leadership team meeting is going to happen on Sunday morning. I want you to meet me in the parking lot at 7 o'clock. Don't be late. And these kids were like, hang on, 7 o'clock comes twice a day? on a Sunday. When did that start happening? He's like, no excuses. Like, I want you to be there. Don't be late. So they roll in the parking lot, 7 o'clock on Sunday morning. There's this big bright yellow thing in the sky. They're wiping boogers out of their eyes. They're barely awake. Youth pastor's sitting in the middle of the parking lot. He's got the church van cranked, all the doors open. He says, get in. Kids, get in. He shuts the doors. He throws it in drive, pulls out of the parking lot at 7 o'clock. He drives down the road, gets out on the interstate, drives 2 hours up the interstate, pulls off on this random exit, drives 3 or 4 miles down this road, and pulls off into the parking lot of this big church. He puts the van in park. He does not turn off the engine. He turns around in his seat. He looks at his kids. He says, get out. And the kids are like, I'm sorry, what is this? He said, this is our leadership team meeting this morning. Get out. And they said, well, where are we supposed to go? He said, don't know. I've never been here before. Get out. They said, what are we supposed to do? He said, it's not my problem. Get out. There's an 8th grade boy in the back, tears streaming down his face. Where are you going to go? He says, I'm going to go down to Cracker Barrel. I'm going to have a nice leisurely breakfast. I'll be back in a few hours to get you. Get out. He said, I had to force these kids out of my van. He said, at 9 o'clock, I squeal out of the parking lot, and at 12 o'clock, I come back to a completely different group of kids. Not literally, though. You got to admit, that'd make a good story in and of itself, right? He said, first of all, these kids wander into what is apparently the forbidden hallway, because some 174-year-old deacon emeritus comes up to him and says, hey, you kids aren't supposed to be here. Get out of the hallway. So he chases them out, and they wander out to the big atrium outside the auditorium. They're standing out there not sure what to do. Some adult comes along and says, hey, y'all should probably be in youth Sunday school. So they walk them out of the building, across the parking lot, out to the education space. They go up 3 flights of steps, and they come into this old school Southern Baptist Youth Sunday School room, or it's a big opening assembly room with all of these individual classrooms off to the side. Well, now the tables have turned, because there's now 50 sets of eyeballs that are turning around staring at these brand new kids who don't know what to do with their hands, and they're staring at their shoelaces. And so some adult comes over, a youth Sunday school teacher, and says, hey, you're new. Here's a warm cup of orange juice and a stale donut. Take and eat, right? And they're like, there's nowhere back here for you to sit. Let's walk you down front. So they got to walk all the way down front in front of 50 sets of eyeballs that are staring at them. Youth pastor's up there on stage. He's doing his horse and pony show, talking about things that nobody understands, using acronyms for events that nobody, including him, knows what the acronyms stand for. Well, then they finish opening assembly, and they go to their individual Sunday school classroom. So now it's divide and conquer. All these kids no longer have their friends. They're in classrooms with total strangers. One of the youth Sunday school teachers looks at one of the new kids and says, hey, you're new. Why don't you open us up in prayer and read the Bible passage for this morning? Which, if you ever lead a small group or Sunday school class, do that. New people love it when you do that to them. They sit through this hour, complete misery, and just are totally just out of their element. Finally, Sunday school's over with. They all come back together. They go down 3 flights of steps, out of the education building, across the parking lot, into the auditorium, and they're trying to figure out where they're supposed to sit. They see some kids that they just saw up there, and they're like, okay, I guess that's the student section. We'll sit over there. They go over, suddenly phones and jackets and purses are getting there's no room over here, so they have to go over, sit down on the front row in the splash zone right in front of the pastor, who's spitting on the entire service. This youth pastor said this. He said, from that day when I picked them up until the time that they graduated out of my ministry, he said, I never had to worry about them being the very first to walk across the room. He said, because it was so burned into their psyche what it was like to be new, that they could not ever let anybody else experience that on their watch. And y'all, if there's something that I would challenge you to today that is a blessing, but is going to feel sometimes like a curse, it would be that you never ever lose the guest mentality for people in your church. Here's what I know. We said earlier that every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. And what I know is this, is that tomorrow morning there is going to be somebody who's going to be walking past the door that you're standing at, that this week they got that phone call from their doctor that changed everything for them. They're just looking for hope. They're looking for a place to go where they can find somebody who will pray for them and walk alongside them in their journey. And your church is just one of many that's in their town, but they're going to try you out. Tomorrow morning there's probably going to be somebody in your church that a husband and wife that if God doesn't intervene and do something miraculous in their marriage tomorrow, they're going to be in separate attorneys' offices on Monday morning, dissolving their marriage, and they're they're looking for one last thing. There's going to be a mama who's been praying for her prodigal son to come back to church for years and years, and finally he's going to show up tomorrow, and you have the opportunity. She's praying that we don't mess it up as a church, and you have the opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus to him. And what we recognize is this, is that maybe you came today and you're like, I just want to learn how to pour a cup of coffee and to open a door and to park a car and to put people in a seat. And what I hope you've learned today is it's about so much more than that. This is eternity on the line. There are people that are coming into your doors tomorrow that we got one chance, maybe only one chance, and if we don't steward the time that we have well, then we may not ever get the opportunity to help them take steps towards a relationship with Jesus. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to pray for you. I'd like to pray for your churches. And I would love to send us out with just some challenge of what the Lord might want to do in our congregations tomorrow. When we finish praying, I've got some quick final instructions. So don't sneak out of here during the prayer. That would be awkward. And let me pray for us, and I'll give us some instructions for the remainder of our day. Father, I thank you so much for these men and women who have given up a Saturday, Lord, to come and to talk about a topic as kind of fluffy and nebulous as this idea of guest services. What I hope that you have done for us today is that you have given us a new way of thinking about this, new language to use in talking about this, and a new heart with which to walk forward in this. God, would you allow our churches to be places where guest service is not just a team that we have, it's not something that we do, but it's who we are. It's how we live. Would you allow us to be able to rewrite the cultures in our churches? Those things that are toxic that we would graciously put to death, and those things that are healthy that we would water and put in fresh soil so that we can see those things grow and flourish. And God, I pray for the people who will be walking into our doors for the very first time tomorrow. Lord, would you allow, just based on the principles that we learned today, would you bring people to faith? Not because hospitality is the gospel, but it should always point people to the gospel. And would you allow us to clear the path tomorrow so that people see Jesus and only Jesus? And we ask that in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, couple of things let me give you, and then we're gonna get out of here. The booklets are yours to keep. If you do not have a need for an ink pen that sometimes writes and sometimes doesn't, you can just drop that in the basket on the way out, the markers and things that I gave you. There's also baskets on the table in the back. You can just throw those markers back there because I may or may not have stolen those from our church office without permission. I kind of need to take them back. It was a last-minute thing. I forgot that I needed markers. Last thing for you. End of the day today, I think it's about 2 o'clock. I've got an email that is scheduled to go out to those of you who registered with your email address. Some of you, your pastors registered you under their email address, so you can tell them, hey, I want that email to be forwarded to me. There will be a survey on there where you can say, hey, this was what was helpful today. This was what was not helpful today. If you've got a lot of unresolved anger from some of the things that I talked about today, that is your time. Just to fire away, all right? Pastor Don mentioned a little bit earlier today, this is a little bit of a pilot run for some things that we're going to be doing in the future, kind of across North Carolina, and so your feedback will be very helpful for that. But I do want to thank you for being here and for giving up a day. It was great to meet you, and I hope tomorrow is a banner day for your churches. Thank you so much for being a part of the day.